43.4 crores. CSK are entering this mini auction with quite the purse. They are expected to be the ones pushing KKR for what is expected to be the record signing of Cam Green. That's a question we're asking on Chatter. And Gaurav Sundararaman, why don't you start us off? Do CSK actually need Cameron Green?
So there are two answers to this. One, I think every team will need Cameron Green because he's still a generational talent, and you would want to see how best you can keep him. At what price is the question, and how does it affect their balance? How does it affect their team? And worst case, if he doesn't bowl or if he doesn't turn up, do they have enough depth in their squad? I think those are the questions any team will answer when they pick Cameron Green. So for starters, I think when you look at their lineup, the way it's going to be set up, you have Sanju Samson and Ayush Matre at the top, and Ulven Patel, who's also done decently, is going to be like a backup. Number three is going to be Ruturaj. And this is where, from whatever I've seen, a lot of shows, a lot of analysis, I see everybody slotting Brevis and Dube at 4 and 5. If I was part of that franchise, I would kind of skin the cat differently because I think when you're 20 for 2 or 30 for 2, in sometimes that very often it happens in the IPL when you have high intent openers and when you want to maximize the power play. You don't see, say, the third or fourth over Brevis coming in or the Dube coming in. I just feel it's a bit too early. So I still think number four is a big vacancy for CSK, and the top three are right-handers. So that automatically makes me go behind Venky Iyer, and I think Venky Iyer fits perfectly for them at number four. He kind of comes in if he can play spin very well. He can take on spin if they've got a good start, or he can kind of just anchor a little bit and then allow Brevis and Dube to come in at the right entry point. So I would skin the cat differently, which is why I think the desperation for Green should not be there. And if they get Green, he also slots in at number four, and that makes it four right-handers at the top, and maybe for Brevis, it's five right-handers at the top. And again, from my experience, the reason why people are clamoring for left-right, at least a couple of left-handers, is because sometimes you play on one end of the square where you have one very shorter boundary. Sometimes you play on the other end, right? So that's one of the big reasons, and you don't know that. That happens at least 3 or 4 games in a season. So that is something you want to have. A bunch of more left-handers is still okay. But I wouldn't want a bunch of five right-handers because there are more left-arm spinners and leg spinners in the auction. Whereas if you take five left-handers in the top five, or like something like what Rajasthan had, you don't have enough off-spinners to counter that kind of skill. So that's why I think CSK might move towards Venky Iyer at number four, which is why they don't need Green. And then it kind of pans out easily. You get Venky Iyer for whatever price it is, then go behind a bunch of all-rounders, bowlers, and just focus on getting that sixth bowler in the 11 somehow.
Yeah, I have a different view, and I know what GS is saying exactly on the 30 for 2 situation. But the more I speak to franchise coaches as well as players, 30 for 2 is a scenario where you're always tempted to have your middle order capable of playing the situation rather than go excess with a batter who might be more redundant when you don't get into the 30 for 2 situation. So that's what happened with KKR when they became really top heavy. To a degree, even sorry, yes, but even the Sunrisers at times you're really trying to figure out what to do with Nitish Reddy. Is he a number 6? Is he a number 4? So for me, Dube, I think, and Brevis are not as much of a challenge. I mean, you've heard this before on our shows. I'm sure that even Hendrik Klassen's a good enough player to come in a little bit earlier. Yes, the entry point to maximize his impact may be after a certain stage, but in an impact player era, you should have that batting anyway. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think the better side is the one which has enough top order batters and enough middle to lower order batters. With Gaikwad at 3, I think that's the biggest call they would have to make. Does Samson disrupt or help the Gaikwad situation? They've made a call, and I think it's a damn good call. So Gaikwad at 3, I think, is the insurance you want. If you're 20 for 2 after that, if you play one more top order batter, that could be in the same situation you were last year with Rahul Tripathi. So for me, I would keep Brevis and Dube as my designated 4 and 5 for now, which leaves the 6 and 7 open. Livingstone is a more natural fit at 6, and they will also need a part-time spinner because of Jadeja's trade. Noor Ahmed will clearly be the lone spinner, but I think CSK have also given us an indication that spin's not going to be as much of a factor like it was in the years gone by. So I don't see them necessarily being really keen on having top-of-line spinners. I heard some people ask me about Wanindu Hasaranga at CSK. I'm not quite sure 2 overseas spinners is the way to go. So 6 and 7 is the key over there. Maybe if not Livingston, there's a David Miller who fits in that kind of role. And I think the other thing they've got to figure out is a seam bowler. I think if you're relying only on Khalil Ahmed and Anshul Kamboj, you're a little light. And Nathan Ellis, sometimes players are damn good, but because we don't see them enough, we think they're outstanding. When they get like 12, 13 games, they can also find it challenging, but they'll need some backup there. So I see CSK prioritizing the 6-7 slot and an Indian as well as potentially an overseas fast bowler. Cam Green fits there. Liam Livingstone fits there. And if they don't get either of those two for some reason, they shouldn't, because they should get them with the purse they have. Perhaps a specialist lower order finisher.
Just
Just
adding to that
one,
list of, yeah, go on, GS.
just to I still think they can get both Livingston and Venky Iyer. So they can look at that combination as well. That's what I was thinking. I know, like for me, Livingston, obviously that whatever you say, I completely agree with it. I just said that maybe they don't need Green for that. So that was my point.
Yeah, but I think the Green is part of this, but primarily it is to
He'll be part of
play
it.
tactically
I
with
like
the
the
option purse.
idea. I like the idea of Venky Iyer at CSK very much. I think it fits.
Yeah, but I don't know whether they will go. Personally, I don't think CSK will be hot after Venky Iyer. Livingston, yes. The other guy, like I said, they won't be looking at. And they also have, GS, by the way, Urvil Patel you mentioned, right? And the role that Ronak, you mentioned at 7, that's a hole to fill. We all agree on the 3 roles they need to fill primarily are those 3 roles. And one of the options they have in house is Urvil Patel as an impact player at 7. So they are considering that, I think. So they can even bat him if they don't get the right kind of a thing. Livingston, Bracewell, and whoever, if there's an uncapped, they do need Hasaranga, I'm not sure. I looked at the wrist spin numbers at Chipok. There's barely any time any wrist spinner has played there. Of course, Noor is more like a left arm spinner, but wrist spinner. But right arm wrist spinners rarely I've seen. I can't even remember, and the numbers are very, very. The sample size is very small, so I don't see Hasaranga kind of fitting in there unless they don't get Bracewell types. They were looking. I think they would have wanted someone like Maxi. He would have been better as an option there. Clearly, they would have gone for that. So yeah, fast bowlers, then dime a dozen there. There's a lot of options they can look for overseas and not Indian as such, but overseas, yes.
While you think these players are more important, and yes, CSK are unlikely to go for a high-profile spinner, but you look at that squad, there's Noor Ahmed, and then there's Shreyas Gopal. So it's quite certain you do need a spin option. If Noor Ahmed gets injured, you don't have a spinner for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
Shreyas Gopal barely
they
plays.
will also think a left arm spinner also, which could be an uncapped guy because there's no capped left arm spinner. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see anyone Indian especially.
Dustin?
Yeah, I think when it comes to spinners, they'll probably look at their scouting and look for some uncapped players because I know Ravi Bishnoi is the one player they could go for, but then do they want to spend a decent amount of their purse? Maybe they'll bid for him and if they get him cheap, then great. But if he goes for a higher price, I think they'll be more focused, as everyone's saying, on those all-rounder spots because what they lack at the moment is all-rounders. And we've seen even in the impact player era, having all-rounders is important. So that's why I feel like they'll definitely look for one overseas all-rounder. If they can get Green, fine. But otherwise, maybe Livingston, Bracewell, one of these players. And then maybe also an Indian all-rounder, maybe somebody like a Shivam Mavi, who we haven't mentioned, who's having a decent run with the bat. Or maybe a Indian finisher like an Abhinav Manohar just to come in late and hit some big shots. Because, yeah, it's really from those numbers 6 to 8. Of course, Dhoni will take one of those spots, but you have to figure out the other 2 there.
Just pointing out that they reconstructed their batting, and we've said this before, by and large, through some of the smart replacements they did last year. But if you have to ask the question of who's going to be their death bowler, you've got Ellis as number 1, who hasn't had a full IPL season ever, even though he's highly rated and is more than capable. And your next answer is Khalil Kamboj.
Yeah.
So that in itself, I think, is a bigger area of concern with the release of Patirana. At least you had a role sorted there. So I just
but I don't. But there's not anyone in the auction I see as that bankable.
No, they won't break the bank, but they have to use a large part of their squad to get multiple options there who they think can fill that role. That's
but the overseas fast bowling, you look at it, there are too many. They will, but fit overseas fast bowlers who can last. Some of the names where you have mentioned, that is the question for that. Like all these are quality bowlers, Matt Henry, etc. But then there is a question mark always about fitness. So while Ellis has not played, Ellis has been rated as one of the better T20 bowlers. So it's not his fault that he's not played at the franchise that he has been. So he's not. And this time, I think from whatever I know, and GS also knows from CSK insiders, it's like Ellis is going to get that lead role because there is no other choice they have as such.
That's the point I'm making.
They would still be in the market for an overseas seamer.
They're four
No,
overseas
the point
players.
you're making is the different one. You're saying that Ellis is not your lead bowler, but whereas the franchise is seeing Ellis is their lead bowler.
I didn't say Ellis is not their lead bowler. I'm saying they banked on a player who hasn't had a full IPL season to be their lead bowler.
Hmm.
That's it. So you would want to spare the 4 overseas slots you have, out of which one will be a middle order all-rounder, is what you would think. And then you have to perhaps use that excess purse power to get enough options to cover your death bowling, whether that's overseas or Indian. So I wasn't sure that it'll only be an overseas player. I don't know whether they're
In
more.
fact, the Indian, they also have Gurjapneet, by the way. They have like their Indian fast bowling bench is strong. So they're confident that these guys can rise up, or I mean, they will have to start playing them. So it's just finding that second overseas fast bowler.
When Gurjapneet and Brevis play together, how will we know which is which? Like, how will we know? Yeah.
Who?
Anyway, Brevis and Gurjapneet play together. Yes, sorry.
I think just going, just consuming this whole discussion, the more I think about it, I feel like CSK have like, that means they just have to pay one, they need to get one really big player.
Yeah.
And it looks like from whatever you guys are saying, it feels like, Green seems to be the better fit. If that's the case, then they can go upwards of 25, 26 for just getting Green and then just filling up all the other slots, which I feel there's enough supply, enough. You don't need to like really break the bank for those. So yeah, it's interesting. There are two ways they can do it because if they're not spending it on Green, I don't think they need to. They'll have to spend so much of their money unless they go behind these uncapped talents.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. That is CSK. I'm going to go around the room and everyone give me one dream buy for CSK at this auction. Dustin.
Good question. Go to everybody else, I'll think in the meantime. Okay,
All right.
I'll say Livingston as a spin bowling all-rounder who can come in and hit late. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make this more challenging. You can't repeat any names. So GS, you'll come last. I will test you there. Ronak.
Mustafizur Rahman.
All right. Nagraj.
Bracewell.
GS.
George Linda.
All right. Okay. We've heard it from the crew. Who do you think CSK are going for? This was Chatter.